Good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. Very excited to be with all of you tonight for the second iteration or experience of Meet Me There, which is a monthly intergenerational poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction experience curated by trans, genderqueer poet and sound artist Samuel Ace. Each month, Samuel pairs an established or mid-career artist with an up-and-coming writer for a reading by each artist and a discussion of the resonances between their works. We are really excited to have local poet Billy Sanewood with us, and all the way from Maine, Emerson Whitney. But you'll hear more about both of them as they are coming up to read. I'm going to introduce Samuel Ace. So as I said, Sam is a transgender queer poet and sound artist. His most recent books are Our Weather, Our Sea, Meet Me There, Normal Sex, and Home in 3 Days, Don't Wash, and the chapbook What Started This Mess. Ace is the recipient of the Australia Lesbian Writer Award and the Firecracker Alternative Book Award in Poetry, as well as a repeat finalist for both the Lambda Literary Award and the National Poetry Series. Recent work can be found in Ex-Puritan Poetry, We Want It All, an anthology of radical trans poetry, Then America, Best American Experimental Poetry, and many other journals and anthologies. A book-length poetic essay, I Want to Start by Saying, is forthcoming from the Cleveland State University Poetry Center in 2024. So welcome to you all, and welcome to everyone who's already hype in the chat. Thank you so much for being with us. Feel free to, we're going to have a discussion portion, and we welcome your questions. So don't be shy. We would love to hear what you think, and also for you to celebrate these wonderful writers as they are reading. But without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Samuel Ace, and let's get this party started. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, ER, and thank you everyone who's here tonight. This is our first it's the second reading in the series and the first all virtual reading. Really excited that we're able to hear from Billy Sanewood and Emerson Whitney. And to begin, just like to thank Dartricia Rollins and E.R. Anderson, as well as the entire Charis staff for their stewardship of the literally thousands of events hosted here at Charis. In these times, not unlike most times in history, when violence, untruths, and hypocrisy masquerade as reality, Charis has provided a safe space for clarity, nuance, and honesty. If you haven't done so already, please check out their website. Buy tonight's books from them. You'll find also just an amazing array of events happening almost every night, and most of them are available virtually or live streamed. I'm going to introduce Billy Sanewood first, and then we'll hear from Billy, and then we'll move into listening to our featured reader tonight, Emerson Whitney. But as a newcomer, or relative newcomer to Atlanta, one of the gifts I've received in hosting the Meet Me There reading series, which seeks to pair a local author with the featured reader, has been getting to know some of the incredible trans and queer writers who have made Atlanta their home. As such, I'm very happy to introduce Billy Sanewood, a poet new to me, but whose poems I've come to love. I think you will find that Billy is not only a chronicler of her particular trans experience, but also a careful observer of both the profound and mundane moments one encounters, trans or not, in navigating a perversely gendered world. The work I've read of Billy's is full of exquisite lines, inhabited at times with a sense of dry, ironic humor that seems to capture the varied and yet specific experience of her transness. Lines such as, from the poem called The Collective Name for a Group of Sad Trans Girls is called a Discord. This is the line, we are glass animals with the cabinet door open and the children home from school. Or from the poem Selfies with Sasquatch, before I transitioned, when people took my picture, nobody could get me in focus. Billy keeps a blog on her website, which I encourage you to read. In some recent entries, she talks about how in life the writing changes, as does one's life. She speaks openly about her process of letting go the expectations of what the writing should or shouldn't be. She comments that, quote, allowing the writing to come seems to be the act of self-acceptance, unquote. I unconditionally agree with that statement. Her writing is an act of self-acceptance, love for the self and the world. Let's hear from Billy Sainwood. Sainwood.
You're fine. Hi, thank you for that incredible intro. It's a pleasure to be reading here with Emerson. So I'll just get right to it. This poem is called The Lesbian Prometheus. The god's mistake was saying forever and thinking we wouldn't have time to fall for each other. That a titan and an eagle couldn't find more than pain and the full belly if they had forever to figure it out on a long enough timeline. A liver is as good as a promise. Claws kiss as deeply as a tongue, and the right kind of pain is calligraphy. They were made for each other. Their little hurts and epistles, finding hope and hunger and the will of the gods, the titans, stitched over skin, a wax seal on a red love letter, dear eagle. Tear the mailbox of my torso open each day. Find purpled and wine-drunk, ripe and sweetly bleeding, this everyday gift, this thing again, this love letter I made just for you. The eagle eats, learns the nuances of flavor, tastes the difference between meat that is taken and meat that is given, and learns to push past the liver, past the pink waterfall of flesh, and, soft as a kiss, hushed as a whisper, closes its beak around the titan's heart. Flying away, the bird will hope that its feast will grow back. Watching the bird, the titan knows that what was given was eaten, and what was eaten will have to be held. Yeah, so that's what we're up against here. I've also been writing a series of poems about revisiting media that I loved as a child and as a growing teen boy, and now seeing it again through the lens of a trans woman. So this is Sestina for the trans women watching Silence of the Lambs. We are still holding hands in the coiled dark and waiting to take a breath, holding it hostage in our mouths, letting it fidget against our blood. She turns and smiles. The flickering screen lights her smiles. I kiss both of her hands and apologize for all the blood in the basement and the dark. She shuts both of our mouths. She doesn't mind we are meat and breath. After the credits, the bedroom holds its breath. It rumbles to swallow our smiles in a dark as warm as our mouths. There's violent beauty in our hands we can only show in the dark. I am a wound. She forgives me my blood. Our lips are harloted in blood. There is giddy murder in our breath. We are night vision goggled in the dark. We are photographing our smiles. She puts her soft life in my hands, and a cloud of new moths form our mouths. We make little sounds with our mouths and wear each other's skin, slick with blood, our misunderstood seamstress's hands. This hurt comes as natural as breath. The FBI crimes of our smiles smudge our fingerprints inked in the dark. We can be who we want in the dark. Buffalo Bill, our tight-lipped mouths. We are women lost in our smiles that flutter like moths made of blood. The night has been holding its breath, waiting to see what we can do with our hands. She smiles at me in the dark. Our hands reaching out like carnivorous mouths. We are women made of blood and held breath. So in April, it's customary for poets to push themselves to try to write 30 poems in 30 days for National Poetry Month. And one of the ways to kind of cheat that is to write a bunch of forms. And so I started writing a bunch of crowns of haiku. So this is Crown of Haiku for Divorce. At the end of things, I left in a rental car, temporary ride. Divorce is just like breaking up, but you have to tell the government. We had our reasons to stay together, to leave, drawing our last straws. Of course we had fights. In the quiet aftermath, a peaceful silence, we still talk often. Prodding at the us-shaped gaps in our changing lives, pictures, Instagram, all my colorful new skin, her new engagement. We fled a house fire. covered in ash, embracing at the end of things. This poem was alluded to earlier. It takes its title from a shitpost I saw on Reddit, so apologies for that in advance. But this is the collective name for a group of sad trans girls is called a Discord. All the trans girls I know flock to online spaces, like birds of paradise, roosting in front of keyboards, perched in performance chairs. They change their settings to dark mode, change the color of their screen names, change their names into sapphic fragments of themselves like shattered urns. Names of flowers, inside jokes, plays on words, just garish signals from the lighthouses stuck like needles into the ocean of our own isolation and ethernetted by the fraying umbilical cords of our second births, by the braided, waxed, shaved, lasered, and electrolysis hairs of our new puberty. We post selfies, we whoop and heart react, we yearn, we squabble, we shitpost and samizdat. If we ever meet in person, if we ever grip the rough carpet of miles between us and yank each other closer, we are nervous as prom. As glass animals with the cabinet door open and the children just home from school, we kiss and our teeth bump together. If a sound wave moves through a medium, every particle of that medium vibrates at the same frequency. We vibe at the same frequency, with each chime, with each heartbreak, with each new sweating senator screaming for us to crawl back into our blood. We stockpile in mutual aid, we advice and we vent, we HRT and DIY, we progress pick and private message, and every click of the keyboard could be the lock on our front door. Could be shoes we've only seen in pictures clipping across the bedroom floors. All the trans girls I know have spider webs, have stakes in every state, have a reason to cry when something happens to any one of us. And I'm going to close out with this one. There's a phenomenon in the trans community where trans people only date other trans people. It's called being T for T. So this poem is T for T for T for T for T for T forever. It's 275 AD, and Alexandria holds its burning library like a bad taste in its mouth, drilling cinders of stories, scrolls, maps, and mysteries into the night sky in fat curling ribbons. It's right now, and I know more about HRT than my doctor. When I have a question, she usually shrugs and tells me to ask around, ask my friends, see what other people are saying, listen to my body. There's no manual, no textbook, no resource we do not make for ourselves. This is what it means to be T for T. To choose us over who we might have been, to hold ourselves closest, to hold hands with hands that hold us up. If you listen close to my falling breast, you can hear Alexandria. We are all of us bodies of burning libraries, smuggling books with every breath, from the guitar girl at the anarchist book fair to the man dancing out of his top surgery to the year with one more year on hormones than me, who have so many helpful tips. We all learn by word of mouth. By word of bone and blood and fat distribution, T for T is a promise. It is a flickering bucket of clear water. It is a manicured fist full of scrolls screaming, nothing, lover, will die with you. I will carry your truths to the next town. I will upload your zine to the ether. I will build you a Casa Susana with enough acres to hold the whole of who you were when you're gone. The difference between a museum and a library is the number of still living things you can learn from. Borrow this. Give it back. Beg for the next someone to find it. We are alive and we are on fire. We are hoping when we kiss that we can't taste the smoke. The next person to touch me will know my anthology of soot and fingerprints like the evidence of arson. They will read my stepped-on spine like an acknowledgement section. They will know that none of us could do this alone. Alexandria burned and took everything with it. Consider this your alarm. Call it your first whiff of smoke. I wrote this for us, for us, for us, for us, and for us, so that something about us will be fireproof. Thank you.
Oh, Billy, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I love this new work and all of it. So grateful to hear you. Thank you. Yeah. Just taking a deep breath here after that. Okay. So, thinking about this introduction to Emerson Whitney and his work, I couldn't ask for more apt lines from Billy Sanewood to introduce Emerson. From Billy's poem, "We're not in Kansas anymore, we're in Ulta," Billy says, "Transition is living in a house on the wind, spinning." Coincidentally, one of the through lines in Emerson's Daddy Boy is a kind of Odyssean journey that he embarks on with a group of tornado-chasing tourists. For many days, their house is a van that travels through several states on a quest to experience a live tornado face-to-face. The tornado chasers are optimistic, obsessed with possibility, projection, and their own imagined idea of what it might be like to experience the godlike force of a maelstrom. But weather, not unlike gender and transness, proves to be a wild and unpredictable force. If you haven't read it already, you will have to read the book to know whether or not that particular god ever appears. In the course of his journey, Emerson meditates on masculinity, specifically the idea or category of dad with a capital D. If his book Heaven centered on mom, this book explores the cultural expectations of masculinity as revealed through his brothers, his fathers, as well as his tornado-chasing companions. The idea of dadness is also explored through the insights Emerson comes to about himself, perceptions that arise out of his transness and the ending of a long-term relationship with a dominatrix who Emerson once called daddy. Although it's been categorized as nonfiction, I consider Daddy Boy a kind of hybrid, perhaps a book-length poem, as Emerson has a poet's eye for the detritus of actual life and the fragmentation of memory and consciousness. As such, I might also call the book a poetic memoir, a form of life writing that eschews linear narrative for the more complicated mess of reality. And I dearly love that he's found a form that reflects the mess of it all. In an interview with their publisher about their previous book, Heaven, Emerson says, "I'm less afraid to be vulnerable in my work." The reception of the book has helped me see how powerful autobiographical vulnerability is. In this reading, you'll have the chance to experience Emerson's gorgeous vulnerability, and through theirs, I hope you will gain greater courage to express your own. Emerson?
Oh, thank you so much, Sam. Wow, what a gorgeous intro. I truly am so honored to be here and to be in your company. And Billy, thank you so much. What you just shared, Sam, really, I think, centers us so perfectly. It's just a true, it's truly my hope that other people embrace that kind of vulnerability that bubbles up when they work on things like this too. So thank you for that invitation for us all to consider. I think I'm just going to read kind of straight through because I feel we have a poet's audience at the moment. And Billy, you helped me feel comfortable kind of going through it from the poet-centric place. So thanks for that. This is Daddy Boy. And Trace, I saw you in the chat. You might see, this might be a little bit familiar to you actually, because you published a bit of this in EOAGH back when. All right. Clouds on all sides were sucking in on themselves. Hank was driving the car through locusts. Paintball pelts of yellow streaked everywhere, closing up the windshield. The sound of it was soft, like someone sticking solo cups in chain link. He was laughing and driving 80 or 90. Ty in the front seat bit his middle finger and played like he was bored. Nobody could see and nobody cared. Hank kept his body relaxed. He drove like he was driving a bus and was about to wave to people. The light glowed through the bugs that were making mud of themselves across the car. The only smell was a grassy one, from the insects dying and the 5-in-1 shampoo that the boys all shared. There were 4 of us in the car. I had a tech deck in my pocket that I never played with. I just kept it around like a key. I was listening to Nelly on my Discman, and Hank was driving through the locusts, laughing, saying, you know, they're trying to eat each other, right? Hank had won a trip to Orlando by putting a piece of paper into a box by the register at a Tom Thumb in Dallas. That's where we were driving. I'd won something the same way about a year prior from the same Tom Thumb. Do y'all know what Tom Thumb is? You know, it's the grocery chain. It was a holiday stocking that was red and mesh and full of old candy. When my mom wasn't looking, I'd registered to win, and they called our house later, and I remember her waving me over to the phone. What did you do? She'd waved, but I'd won. I picture Hank putting the piece of paper in the cardboard box for fun. Tom Thumb paid for our flight and our hotel. It wasn't for Disney, just for Orlando itself. Hank wanted to take us. We hadn't ever been on a trip, just the four of us, my two brothers and Hank. It was spring. We rented a red Chevy Blazer at the Orlando airport and drove toward a circular hotel with rooms that opened onto a font of fake indoor plants. I bumped around with Gunnar in the back seat. We had a ways to go, along two-lane highways with swamp nearby. It was just a straight road, and then the cloud of locusts. It's true what Hank said, that they swarm because of turning cannibal. They're hungry for each other, and they're being eaten at the same time. They're chasing and running. Each one realizes it, like threading tape, like legs getting plied apart. I haven't seen a locust in so long, but I dream about them often. Little desperate streaks on the windshield. I wet my fingers with my tongue. Hank had such a specific smell, still does. This is probably his hair. He has a lot of shaggy hair. He uses ripped towels after the shower and keeps unhooked appliances all throughout his house from different projects getting worked on everywhere. In the winter, he puts a tree together in the living room and hangs a plastic cranberry wreath on the door. He has a drafting table that takes up nearly the whole floor space of his bedroom. There's blueprint papers everywhere. The dog's tail hits the tubes the papers go in. He's always laughing, saying things like, it's all fun and games until someone loses an eye, and then it's just a game to try to find the eye. Whenever I visit, I follow him to his jobs. He works endlessly, and I go with him to whatever site he's working on, and everyone says we look so much alike. If that's true, it's only a coincidence. This is a guy who gets so angry when I say I don't know where I'm from. Texas, goddammit, you motherfucker, you're from Texas. And he laughs the whole time, saying somehow I'm the only one of his children born in the state, except he wasn't even there when I was born. My brothers, Gunnar and Ty, look like Hank. The three of them have that hair. They're bonded. Ty is stylish these days, with nice sunglasses. Gunnar and I have the same eyebrows and nose. We're shaped a little more similarly, but he's still all Hank, undeniably. I'm much smaller, and my knuckles are a darker color, and my face has different kinds of bones. Ty and Gunnar play a lot of games together. It used to be magic cards and then some kind of intense video game. I never know what they're talking about. They're best friends. Then my dad. I used to call him Bio Dad, but I don't even know what that means. Maybe pop is better, like the meaning of it that's to appear. I've got pictures like this. I'm staring at my mom, and Dad's face just comes over, hovers near her shoulder, and it's a surprise. They broke up when I was 18 months old. Oh, Father, says Etymology Online about the origins of Papa. Whenever we talk about it, my grandma tells me the story about my dad and how she'd buy him chocolate milk and he'd use small medicinal amounts of it in regular milk to make it last until it went bad. She also tells me that my first word was either dad or dog, and that he'd dress me up in little pink outfits with black buckle shoes and carry me everywhere. We moved in with my mom's parents on the East Coast when I was 2 weeks old, because my dad had lost his job in Dallas. He started working the front desk at a gym and would take me to his shift sometimes. He was always bouncing you, she says. Honestly, I've spent most of my life thinking I was missing this. These days, I only know my dad through photos on social media. I have screenshots of the photos saved on my phone. He has puppies on his chest in one, and I've looked at it and wondered what it would feel like to be near him. He wears a little straw cowboy hat in these photos. We both have short torsos and are sweet looking, I think. He's little. I want to know what kind of soap his is. I see people sometimes that look like him and want to go up and talk. I remember when I had an athlete's foot a lot as a kid. He told me he'd had that too. We've both had ankle injuries on the right side. Both of us will pick up trash if it's around. How is it that I feel like it was me who left him? Like I was the one who ended things? Thinking back on it, I imagine experiencing a supreme loss of strength. I imagine it gone. This is important. On our way to school or on errands, Hank liked to scream for no reason. He drove a big black Navigator pickup, or sometimes a silver one because the cars came from his job. When he'd pick me up from school, it was always several hours late and I didn't care. 1 out of every 5 times I'd get in the car, I'd put my backpack down between my knees, and we'd drive a few blocks, and then he'd blood-curdle scream. There'd be cars all around, but no kids anymore. What were we training for? He'd shriek randomly. The scream would start in my head and go through my hands. Maybe this book is the back of a wide open mouth. Am I yelling? I like this image of an open mouth, like made with reckless brushstrokes in a painting. A mouth that's also a cloud, its base widening, purple and pregnant. I want to live inside those changing conditions. No departure, no arrival, just a wide whipped up pause. Here's the question. How do you live without resolution? I realize I'm all tangled. I want to relate to this tangle without untangling, without setting fire. I have a small frame, legs that spread out slightly when I sit. I take pictures of myself shirtless from my computer after I shower. I don't post any of them. This is the moon to me, this surface. It's devastating, the link between the hunk that I move around in and my consciousness. What bridge is this? I used to slice at it. I was one of those kids who'd bend a paperclip apart while we were talking. I'd do it slowly so it wasn't obvious. I would make a sharp point, sharp enough to scab my tongue if I sucked on it. Its pink plastic loosened into sheaths like bark. I'd nod at you while you were talking and stick the pin end of it into my hand until it left a swelled hole, bright orange. You don't know me like this. I haven't behaved like this for years. You know me as someone who walks upright and loves people and moves softly through the snow. All of this is true. Still, there's a residue. The plains make a mess of me, and still I come. I have come. I wonder what I want in a very loud way, out loud, like why did I come back here? I'm asking it, but I'm saying it. Do you know what I mean by the plains? I drove across the U.S. a few times, and each time found myself wanting to take pictures of the backs of gas stations. Hank and Ty and Gunnar and I lived across the street from a 7-Eleven. The lights still do something to me. The grass is always waving in the back. Bugs make their way up the air machines with their hum. The colors are always simple at gas stations and primary. The flowers are patient and brushed. The black rubber mats come out at night and get washed. A slushy machine rotates. The plains are flat as fuck. It's dry. Sometimes there's a shallow, but rarely. When I had to go to the Y day camp while my mom worked, they'd take us to Water World, which was a field that had cracking grasshoppers and a shade shelter and one small shallow with no water. When I got older, I'd plow through the plains, sit pantsless in black Fords pulled onto the side of the road, Dopplers going, ugly laptops on the dashboard. I was 13 and living in tornado chat rooms. I'd wanted to learn more about weather. I was the only one in the house who'd used the internet for a long time, and I'd meet random guys on there. One of the guys was the first to suggest that I should stick my finger inside myself. I hadn't thought of it. Hannah Arendt in On Violence says something about how proximity to death increases our vitality. I always have to remember that the most dangerous thing I ever did storm chasing was meeting those guys from the chat rooms when I was a teenager. The internet spreads out like prairie. I haven't lied to myself about it this time. So, I want to take us to a divorce a little bit, because that word is in the room, in the Zoom room. And I think, yeah, this book is grounded in that for sure. So yeah, here's some of that. I've always wanted to do this thing where I describe the planes. I just want to describe them. Some of these images, these locust ones. I don't belong, really, is the feeling. You know, when Joan Didion went to the dam or whatever, I'm doing that, I decided. I decided it from inside a tent in my backyard in LA where I was living at the time. This was 2017. It had taken weeks to arrive. It was canvas and 10 by 12, and I set it up on top of the concrete extension of driveway that abutted our neighbor's yellow neglected Forerunner. My ex and I had lived together almost 9 years in a series of places. We'd been together a third of my life. This duplex was the last place we'd share, and I was now sleeping in the backyard because we'd started hating each other. The tent was the glamping kind. Actually, it was the military kind that had recently become the glamping kind. I'd set it up after going to IKEA in Burbank for a futon and a desk. When Joe and I moved to LA, rent for a 1-bedroom was actually okay, but not anymore. It was cheaper to furnish a tent than to move out. I also wasn't sure I was moving out. I drove back from IKEA with a super small futon that somehow fit in my Corolla with the doors slightly open. It was May, and I kept thinking about how it was definitely storming somewhere. I checked the radar to see how much it was storming in Texas. There was no safety from the sun in LA. The light was violent. No clouds had come by in forever. I was so tired of squinting. I checked the weather in Texas again and again. It had become compulsive. The whole reason I was in the tent was because I'd begun to want things I'd never let myself want anymore. It was odd. It sort of seeped in. Out of nowhere, I'd begun wanting to pull a person toward my pelvis, to watch my arms flex while I did it. I wanted to feel someone else in my hands. This switch wasn't allowed in the framework of our relationship. This is why we'd started hating each other. Originally, all I'd wanted to do was follow a more powerful person around and do the dishes for her or carry her bag. It was nice to be looked at, to be held by the chin and wanted. Joe and I went to a couples therapy session about this just before I moved into the tent. It was one of the last things we did together. I picked the counselor because she was vaguely a friend of both of ours, and that felt nice. She asked Joe if she could ever let me top. I winced when the counselor asked it because I needed her to do the asking, and I hadn't realized it until then, which felt very much like bottom behavior. I was a mattress with change dropped onto it. The feeling had started small, like the smallest pearl of an irritant. When I would do something that had originally turned me on, like ask, "What can I do to make your day better, Daddy?" and doing what she wanted when she wanted it, or even better, anticipating that. My ex, a full-time dom, had always argued that the bottom was really the powerful one, was the fulcrum for the whole thing. That was me, I guess. But in the counseling office, she just laughed. The therapist looked at me for a split second, sort of stunned, then shrugged and said, "I think you got your answer, Emerson." Joe and I had been in a lifestyle S&M relationship the whole time we'd been together. Our play had slowed by that point to less public pain stuff, but at her 40th birthday, another dom had pierced my arms up and down and put candles on my piercings for Joe to blow out. We were at a small club in New York, and her friend did a slow and careful job in the hallway, and I walked back into the crowd glowing from the candles with no blood at all anywhere, because doms are incredible at what they do. Joe's face twisted as I got close, and I thought maybe it was me. I looked down at the cake I was holding and then at her face. She brightened for me, but later she got mad at her friend because piercing me was her job. I wasn't in trouble, though, because in this framework where I had no agency, I couldn't be in trouble. I'd loved this. It was so relieving not to be able to do anything wrong. Do you know how amazing that feels? But after years of this, almost 10 years, it had started to hurt. Maybe this is the part that matters. On my left wrist is a tattoo of the initials MHM. Hank told me that he would have named me after his grandmother. Those are her initials. I wanted to put the name in me. It was my first tattoo. On that same arm, just a bit further down, is a brand. It looks like I've tested positive for TB. We hadn't thought that through. It's true, we didn't. It absolutely looks like I tested positive for TB. It will be there for the rest of my life. 3 raised dots that Joe made there with a cauterizing iron on the soft part of my inner arm, just before my elbow. We'd done it on a whim, I showed everyone. I rubbed my eyes in the tent because it was 8 p.m. or something. I looked around in my sheets for socks. There were maple trees in front of the house, thin and flaky, but they were there. The sun was gone. We'd fought in the kitchen a few nights before. We'd not been decent in our fighting. Fights like the kind where it gets so sour so fast. Like, where is that person who was making out or touching me or being alive in my life just moments before? Fighting is psychedelic like early morning is. The kind where I can't see my own hand in front of my face. Maybe all fights are about power, but there was such an agreed upon power imbalance in our relationship that this was a new kind of argument for us. I hate those end feelings, like when it's lightning to be near each other. Like sometimes dogs can walk alongside one another just fine, but then other times they open their mouths to each other's necks and need to bring the other down to be okay. I wasn't trying to bring her down. I think I was saying give me space, which maybe is the dog thing too. I hadn't wanted space before. I hadn't wanted anything besides what she wanted. In that evening haze, I saw something that for a second I thought might be lightning, but turned out to be a police helicopter passing above the backyard. I felt like crying. The feeling was in my stomach. For the first time since I was a kid, I thought to go home. I opened my computer and typed in Dallas. I typed in May. Ride with us, this ad said. Come to North Texas, meet in Dallas, and then we go. It was an advertisement for a small storm-chasing business. I'd forgotten those tours were a thing. They seemed to belong to the early 2000s. I clicked on an image with a faux Discovery Channel font. It sent me to a page of storm-chasing tours, the ones that take people into the plains, up and down Tornado Alley during the best time of year to be there. The promo pictures from the tours were of happy people, different heights and skin tones, standing by wedges, by thin funnels, off to the sides of the road or in it. They were in windbreakers. The site said it's for thrill seekers, and I was like, yes, that's me. Right now, that's me. I found a very specific graph of all the different tornado chasing companies. I started clicking around and wondering if I could convince one to let me come for free and write about it. I crafted an email that I sent to something like 17 different companies with names like Tornado Extremes and Weather Warriors and pictures of big rotating radars parked next to white vans. I told them I was a writer and I wanted to join. I'm awful at joining. Why did I think this would be fun? I really am bad at joining. I don't know why I thought it would be fun. But when I wrote the storm chasing people, everybody said no to me writing or writing along as a writer, except 2. I've been refreshing my email for days. Derek at Storm Travelers says something like a lot of these tours are red, but ours is very blue. I hadn't asked about this at all. I realized they'd read about me and said it as a way of articulating queer and trans friendly. Their logo was a clip art tornado in front of a rainbow flag. I Googled Derek. He was smiling with soft eyes in every photo. When he emailed back, it was to ask me why I wanted to come. I found myself explaining that I grew up loving weather like other kids loved horses or whatever. I said something about community to Derek and surprised myself. I'd be excited to be in storm chasing community, I said. And he was like, great, let's do it. I didn't want that actually at all. I said it though. He told me I had to pay for all my own food and motel rooms, but the tour itself would be free to me. I could even make money if I took a video that got a lot of views. And that sounded okay because I was between semesters and not making really any money as an adjunct anyway. I did this little dance inside the tent and texted Joe that I was going to go. She texted something nice back with a lightning bolt. I had just wanted her to like me the whole time, from the beginning through the end. I can stop there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emerson. That really, both of those passages. I'm glad you did the divorce one and just that transformation and the visual descriptions of those locusts stayed with me from the moment I read that. Really amazing. Thank you. Gorgeous. So I guess we're going to move into a discussion between the 3 of us, and I think of it as a discussion, not just asking questions, and know that the everybody out there is welcome to ask questions. ER will be funneling them. So I'll just start us off with one, and we can go from there. And you too, please feel free to ask each other questions or comments. It'd be great. So I'm a new dad, a queer and trans dad at that, who's called Dada by my child. I like to think of that moniker as Dada with a small d, but I often do think about how that category fits and does not fit who I am and who I am to my child now and in the future. Speaking of self-acceptance, I do want to be honest with myself. As changeable and complicated as I am, often in conflict with the culture that both me and my child live in. So Emerson, in both Daddy Boy and Heaven, you capture the messiness underlying the categories of mom and dad. Could you both of you, I'd like to hear from first Emerson, then Billy, to talk about how you navigate such categories, both in your writing and in your life. Again, feel free to ask each other questions as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. And congratulations on being a new parent, a new dad. How gorgeous that is. And yeah, I mean, for sure, I love that you pointed to the fact that I I make a mess sometimes in this work, trying to puzzle things through. But for me, those categories are so loaded, just because I kind of come from a dumpster fire of a family in many ways. And fire is a miracle too. So the fact that, it really, that I guess the image of that is really apt in my own life. And for sure with dad stuff in this book, like I looked to Miss Major in the book itself. And I really started this book thinking about, and some of you know me that are here, I think, and maybe are familiar with this, but there's a trans group in my area, the most active one. I feel like it's the only one here really, but the most active one for sure, if there are others. And I wrote this when I was 35, and the group has like a bunch of things that you can join online, and I was looking through their catalog I could join, and it had on Saturdays is a group for trans elders, and it was anyone 35 and older. And I was just like, oh my God, like I'm not really ready to be an elder. I don't feel ready to be an elder. And yet this is my charge, at least in this particular rural place where I live. And, of course, an elder is like map. So the maps that I have from mom and dad are really, I guess I used the word puzzle a minute ago, but they're puzzling to me, my maps. So I've had to look for others. And many of you in this space, and you, Sam, and others, you've been my map. So actually, you're answering my question about those words in your being. And, I'm just so honored to keep watching y'all be and showing me what the possibilities of these words are. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that elder thing, maybe because I transitioned pretty late, I still feel like it's been, 23 years since I first started medical transition, but I still in some ways feel like I'm 23 years old now with a baby. And here I am in my late 60s, actually, at this point. That doesn't feel real at all, or, and seeing that word. But well, yeah, Billy, did you have some thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the reasons I think the title Daddy Boy is so charged is because there's a nexus of like parenthood and kink in a way.
Yeah.
And like, perhaps TMI, in my marriage, there was a lot of like, call me daddy type stuff. And it just like, it was very wrong feeling for obvious reasons. And then like, as soon as a woman called me mommy, I was like, oh, this is different and good. And I like this now. So it's just so funny that we inhabit this space where it's like gender is a construct, non-binary is a thing, it's a spectrum, but then we have these very rigid gendered roles of like mommy and daddy that we both try to inhabit for people and like for ourselves too. And it's interesting the kind of interaction between identity and labels that like seems to be like a perpetual dance of identity and like what we feel comfortable with versus what we definitely don't.
Yeah, and watching a very young person, start to understand the world through language and categories, as young children do, it's really interesting. I can just see their little brain trying to understand their particular parents and what is coming through books and what's coming through, which we try to navigate and be as open as possible. But those they're there, they're big, and maybe we're all in a dance with them, really. So, all right. Are there any questions from the audience? Anybody out there? Okay, well, I'll just go on. Like the mythical quest for the tornado, Emerson. How is becoming trans both an idea and a reality? Your tornado watchers, after their initial excitement, just sort of I get such a sense of their projection, the projection or the idea of what tornado is. But then it's often followed by optimism, excitement, or disappointment. And then in some of them, acceptance. Again, for both of you, how does the difference between projection and reality manifest in your work and your life?
I mean, that's a great question. I love it. That's huge.
Yeah.
We're getting into some, I guess if we're going into projection, that's fun.
Yeah.
And I mean, well, for sure. I think you're drawing on. So I didn't say, man, maybe I missed you and you said it, but all these folks in this van while we're storm chasing, they are pretty much all. They literally are all. The tourists are from Essex, England, which is a phenomenon that I would never guessed. I truly thought that everyone on this kind of an adventure tour, because this is sort of adventure tourism, I would never have thought that they would be like, from anywhere other than like Colorado. Like for some reason I thought they were all going to be folks from Colorado, like moneyed cis white guys, like in those like flying squirrel suits that jump off mountains. Like that's who I thought it was. Absolutely not that population. And I was super inspired by their awe of, again, sort of this gas station aesthetic. They were in full awe. They were like shocked that there was Bible stuff like in a little rotating kiosk by the door of the gas station, and they were just excited by truck nuts and like things that I just like I don't find awe-inspiring. So of course this book is also about what it means to be taken toward rapture, like both in domination and in like this tour environment. There was no way I couldn't think of that. It really looks the same. And it was about me to some extent wanting to be my own fulcrum for that and less so out. So like, yeah, I mean, this idea of like I think of when you say projection, I think of like the gap. Like there will always be a gap between the word and the meaning of the word. And like, there's just this chasm between what I see and think and what someone else sees and thinks. And yet I try to throw the rope of words across every single day and scale the chasm. And what's cool, at least about this book and what I learned from hanging out in that environment, was that like it was really fun to see something from their perspective. So yeah, I think that like that malleability, the desire for like I guess I'm curious, and I hope that I'm curious in this work about what other people are thinking and where they're coming from, because that's certainly something that keeps me feeling engaged.
Yeah.
As a thinker.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I love that. Billy, did you have anything to add to that? Or
Yeah, I think storm chasing is like a really good metaphor. I mean, at least speaking for my experiences, like I'm very early in my transition. I started at 30, I'm 31 now. And this feeling of like all of your cultural examples are very dramatic, you know. Trying to think of so that like people are like in hiding and then suddenly they reveal their new gender selves and they've gone through the procedures and they're like fully in this inhabited experience. But like so much of it is quotidian, so you think that like storm chasing is like seeing tornadoes all the time, but a lot of it is just sitting in vans.
Totally.
There's a lot of like the metaphorical equivalent of like the gender transition experience is just sitting around in vans and like figuring out women's clothes. Like the sizing difference and like these really boring things that are monumental only to the person who experiences it. So like if you're in the van, sitting in the van is like a big deal because you're chasing something. And so much of like gender is about chasing this like what you hope will happen or what you expect to happen or what will happen eventually. It just takes a lot of sitting in vans.
I love that. Awesome.
Yeah, I feel that too. And you know, what is it if it's not projection to move through transition or move through what that image is that we carry, some of us from a very young age, you know, and kind of harks back to what we were talking about in that first question. You know, these are the categories we aspire to or think ourselves into, but then once we're there, it's life. It's life. And you know, what is that difference? And I think you both you know, really in the act of writing, I think in the act of observation of yourself and the gas stations and the Ulta store, or you know, all of those very specific encounters really talk about that learning. You know, what is it? How am I in relation to this world that presents itself to me? Beautiful. So we do have a couple of questions from the audience. Chloe Spencer asks, Billy, are you planning on publishing a collection anytime soon?
When I have stuff and when I have interest, that will be when I answer that question. I'm still very much figuring it out. I started poetry like a long time ago when I was 18. I was very much a teenage boy doing poetry back then, and I carried that through college. And then I kind of took a 7-year hiatus to figure stuff out, figured more stuff out. So now I'm kind of writing from a completely different lens. But I think I wrote about this in my blog, which is a horrible sentence to say out loud. But I wrote about this in my blog, this idea of re-engaging with work and with writing as something internal and something for me, like first and foremost, like using it to kind of categorize and catalog experiences as I have them, because this is such an important time to remember for me right now, because so much is in flux about like who I am and what my aesthetic is and what my identity is, because now I know that everything is mutable. So I kind of want to crystallize all these things in amber before I change my mind again. So I'm less interested in how to make sure that my work has an impact on other people versus like having a catalog to look back on as like, you know, similar to like tattoos of like, it's not just the craft of the tattoo, it's the experience of getting it. So that's kind of where I'm engaging with my work these days. Long answer to a short question. Yeah. And the short answer is no.
No, I'm glad you went on with that. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and also Chloe had a question for Emerson. I loved all your descriptions about storms and storm chasing. Can you speak about how those things relate to transness and queerness?
Yeah,
we've been kind of talking about that, but
yeah, I think we've circled around it a bit in the sense that, of course, in some ways for me it's not a metaphor at all. I just really love storms. Like it's like for me this was like a super a major opportunity for me to indulge in like a special interest book. You know, this is sort of me, right? It was me sort of coming to terms with the fact that like this is super cheesy and it's true. And I think in some ways that is how I feel about my embracing of masculinity. It's like this is super cheesy, but it's true. And here I am. And like I do think for sure that like the higher powered aspects of this book are around just the tremendous surrender that's possible, at least for me when I'm in like a
Hmm.
you know earth oriented um change. Like my power was out today, and like my power has been kind of going out after we had this storm, and there was like work being done, but I didn't know it was going to go as late, and there's just like nothing I can do. Like in some ways there is stuff that I can do, but not really, like only to a certain extent. And like my friend and I today were literally just digging a hole, and water just kept coming into the hole, and we were both like, this is so weird. Why is there water in this hole? And it's just like the water wasn't, I mean, I'm just sort of in some ways making no sense, but I'm always in, I always just feel that there's something bigger than me when I'm in these moments where I'm engaging, of course, like with storms, but also with transness too, and queerness. Like it was bigger than me. It continues to be bigger. It continues to shock me and surprise me and be mysterious. And like, what else? What is better than that? Like, how fucking cool that this is our life. Like, I just think that's great that we get to be continually surprised by how like sexuality, gender, and the scope of all of that makes its way into our lives. I just find that really cool. Similarly to storms, I find them really cool.
Thank you. All right, we only have a couple minutes left. There was one other question from Trace Peterson. Emerson, I was struck by that passage about tangledness and, quote, without catching fire. Something about that passage feels like a poetics. I was wondering if you might be willing to speak a little more about what paradox or tension is there. And you have about a minute and a half.
Okay, let's do it. Trace, thank you so much for asking that. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you just beyond. Paradox or tension in I think what I'm trying to say is very Moten-ish, so very Fred Moten, in the sense that I want to be in the I want to be in the break in the white water, but I'm trying to not want it to stop either. I want to actually find sort of this surrender that I'm talking about in this place of cacophony, as well as an appreciation for it to some extent, whatever that means. Like appreciation is sort of a weird word there, but I think what I'm trying to say is I in some ways feel most home. And so if I kick myself out of that kind of tangledness, in some ways I'm in exile. So I'm really wanting to embrace it, is what I'm saying there.
Beautiful. What a great way to end this discussion. And I'm so glad that you spoke about surrender, because that was my final question of what that is. And I think you've covered that, Emerson and Billy, both of you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm going to kick it back to E.R. Anderson to close us out.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank y'all for being here. This was so rich and just exciting. So I want to encourage folks, if you don't yet own a copy of Daddy Boy, click the teal button at the bottom center of the screen. Buy it from Charis. There it is in all its beauty. You can also buy Heaven. You can also buy all of Sam's books. And one day we hope we'll be able to buy Billy's book too. But if you have enjoyed tonight, please do support Charis. It really does help us when you buy event books from us. You can also, of course, make a donation to Charis Circle, our nonprofit programming arm. That always helps us as well. And we have a big night tomorrow night. Roxanne Gay is at the First Baptist Church in Decatur. There are still some tickets available. So if you would like to come hear Roxane Gay talk about Opinions, which is her new book, you can come do that. We'll also be holding down a youth-centric Pride event at Atlanta Pride this weekend on Saturday and Sunday in the park. So it's a great weekend in Atlanta. For folks who are around, come see us. We would love to see you. And we hope whatever you do this Pride weekend, that you stay safe and well. Thank you always to Sam for putting together these beautiful and rich conversations. It's really so lovely and always a pleasure. So everybody take care. Thank you so much for being with us. Good night.
Everyone. Good night.
Thank you.